All right, welcome to Laminations. We're going to talk about how we build the boats, the materials we build them out of. For some people, that's the color of the exterior of the boat, but for us, it's how durable you want it, it's how heavy you're willing to tolerate, or how light you care to have. Those are the laminations. Those are what cause that to happen. But before I dive into laminations, what really influences decisions with regard to laminations is durability and weight. But I want to talk about durability for a second because there's three types of it. And there's two that everyone thinks about. And those are impact resistance and abrasion resistance. Those are the low-hanging fruit. That's what everybody thinks about. But there's another type of durability, and it's longevity. It's how long the boat will last. And what we need to do is we need to compare composites, which are all these, resin and fiberglass, Kevlar, carbon fiber, and Negro, what have you, to plastics, the polyethylenes, the Roylexes, and other thermoplastics that are out there. And composites will outlast any of those materials 2 to 1, or even up to 3 or 4 to 1 easily. They just last that much longer. If you look at an old polyethylene kayak, just before it's retired, the bottom's going to be wavy, and then it's going to get brittle enough and it's going to crack, and that thing's going to go to the garbage. And people are going to try to patch it, but over time you just can't patch those things. Royalex will last longer than that, other thermoplastics as well. But there's a certain point where they reach the end of their usable life. They're no longer reliable boats to paddle for anything long. You can paddle around the local pond in circles, but you're not going to take them on a trip anymore. Composites go much longer than any of those materials. Like I say, 2, 3, 4 to 1 without any trouble at all. And so when you look at the cost of these, you amortize that over a much longer period of time. If you're in your 30s, any one of the boats that you're looking at right now you're going to paddle it until after you can't paddle anymore, until you can't paddle anymore. If you're like some of our customers who are collecting Social Security and getting ARP mailings routinely, they can go to your grandkids. That's how long composites go. And of course, the other thing about composites is they're hand built. Poly boats, they're cranked out of molds. There's very little hand labor in a poly boat. There's much less hand labor in any plastic boat. Royalex, other thermoplastics included in that mix. These are the ones with the greatest love from humans put into them. Regardless of which material you end up choosing, all those materials will benefit from indoor storage. And that's unheated, that's just in the garage, that's all you need. It doesn't need to be your coffee table. But they'll all benefit from indoor storage. They'll just last longer if they don't get UV degradation day in and day out. If you can't do indoor storage, you try to find a place that's out of the sun. So the north side of the building, preferably under a deck, what have you. All those materials that I've named off will all benefit from 303 as well. 303 is a UV protectant. It's aerospace-y, high-end, high-tech stuff. Really what it is it's sunscreen for a boat. Rub it over the whole hull, and you protect the boat from UV. It's just like sunscreen in the sense that it doesn't last for a long period of time, but it does last for long enough to prevent that UV degradation from occurring. How often should you put 303 on a boat? How often should you put sunscreen on your body? None of us do it as often as we should. If you put 303 on these things 20 times a year, you are doing better than 99.9% of the population. If you put it on twice a year, you could aspire to more, but that's still going to help. I want to talk for a second about qualities that all of our boats share before I delve into the separate lamination schedules. And that is, we've spent 40 years working on these boats. Ted spent 40 years working on these boats. I'm not quite that old yet. Charlie spent a lot of his life as well helping to perfect how we build these boats. And we're not there yet. These aren't perfection. These are as close as we can get right now. And we keep researching and testing and seeing if we can come up with better ways to do things. But right now, these are the best boats we can possibly build based on all the experience we've had. First and foremost, we have complex lamination schedules. And what does that mean? That means that when we build a boat, we don't just put full blankets of cloth into the mold and say, hey, another blanket, another blanket. Oh, we want to build a more durable boat? Let's put 2 more in. No, when we build boats, the outer blanket is full. All the rest of it are parts and partials because we can get better strength out of strategic reinforcements and we can create a lighter boat at the same time. And so what does that mean? Well, let's take a look. You can see a few spots where there's strategic reinforcements going on in that. Here's some of the interior. What else is going on? We've got rib covers, and there's a lot inside that you can't even see. These are ways to create a lightweight boat that is more durable than it would be otherwise. We use a custom mixed vinyl ester resin because it's got excellent UV resistance and elongation. So it's great for impacts, and it's that thing where it's going to last you a little bit longer. We laminate our canoes using a complex 2-stage lamination process. So we literally take 2 different steps to build each canoe. It takes us longer to build them that way, but we end up with a better boat as a result. We fully wet bag all our canoes. And that again is a slower process, but we end up with the lightest, strongest boat that we can possibly build. And so now let's jump into Starlight for a second. And so we're looking at a couple of Starlight boats right here. On a Starlight boat, we're trying to build the lightest weight boat we possibly can, so we use a foam superstructure to minimize the weight. And so what does that mean? It's got a foam core, it's got foam ribs, and as we walk down the boat, we see more ribs at strategic points. We don't just put ribs all the way through the boat. We focus the ribs where we need the most structure and the most strength. So at the seat, at the yoke, and at the seat again. By doing that, our ribs are as strong as they can possibly be in those locations. We create the greatest stiffness because, again, when you build a composite boat, it's all about stiffness. We want to build the stiffest thing we can because that's the most efficient thing to paddle. The boats are purposely thin, especially on Starlights near the gunnels. Look at that. Everybody walks up and does that who's unfamiliar with Kevlar and says, oh my God, it's paper thin. You could, I could do this to it and I'd put a hole in it. And it's like, well, not quite, but it is thin at the gunnels because that's not a spot you're supposed to hit with a rock. Where's it strong? Down here. I can squeeze as hard as I want. Look at my thumb turning red, and I can't even move it. There's a ton of material down there. There's not very much up here. Strategic reinforcements. How are Starlights used? They're used for flat water. That is where they excel. Our Boundary Waters outfitters, our Quetigo outfitters, Temagami, Algonquin, Woodland Caribou, you name it. All those outfitters, for the most part, use Starlights. And why? Because you can paddle it down the middle of a lake and run into a rock and be fine. These will stand up to rental environments. These will stand up to the guy saying, well, honey, don't worry about it. It's a rental anyway. They'll handle that. But they're flat water performers. That's what they're geared for. And we'll swing over and we'll just take a quick look. And one of the uniquest things about Starlights is the moray pattern. And you don't get a great view with fluorescent lights, but you can see a little bit of that happening right here. And if you look at the website, you'll see a couple of really beautiful shots of moray patterns. Because Starlights are amazing in terms of that black and yellow and what weird bands that creates. Yeah, they're really cool. Blacklights. They're almost a Starlight, except what we've done is we've added an exterior layer of carbon to it, and then we've eliminated, we've still got the foam core, but now we've eliminated some of the ribs. We don't need as many ribs in these boats because there's more material. We're getting a stiffer boat, so a Blacklight is a stiffer boat than a Starlight. It is a little bit higher performance boat than a Starlight is. It's a more durable boat, and that's the biggest focus on Blacklight. So we add a couple of pounds, 2-3 pounds by adding that layer of carbon, removing some ribs. And in so doing, we create a notably more durable boat than a Starlight. Carbon and Kevlar work together to create a beefier lamination together. If we took all the Kevlar out of this boat and we substituted all carbon for that, it wouldn't be as durable. And if we took the carbon out and we substituted Kevlar for that, it wouldn't be as durable. It's the combination of those two materials that makes for a stronger boat, a stronger Blacklight. So who uses a Blacklight? Well, it's still a portaging lamination. It's still a lightweight lamination. But now, it's the person that says, hey, when I come to a portage, I take it. When I come to a portage, I try to skip it. And what is that? I drag the boat up the little creeks. If I come to a rapid, I might try to run it. If it's not, something major, I'm going to try to run it. This isn't a whitewater boat. This is not a whitewater lamination, I should say. It's not intended to be hammered around day in and day out, but it will handle some of that abuse. And so for the person that says, most of what I do is flat water paddling, but I paddle rivers on occasion, and I paddle some class 1s and 2s, and I'm willing to get out when I hit the really bony sections, or if I hit really big whitewater, I'm willing to stop and portage. That's a Blacklight. That's where those boats are going to excel. And so now we got to jump a long ways down the aisle here, past. You can see the moray pattern. There we go. There's a moray pattern on that Starlight. There you get to see the Blacklight and all its sexy black beauty. And now what we've got is a white gold. What's going on with a white gold? Well, now instead of that Blacklight being carbon and Kevlar, now we've subbed a couple little less expensive materials, polyester and a Negra, to create a boat that is a lower priced option than the Blacklight. It's more durable than the Starlight, but it's not as durable as the Blacklight. So first of all, who tends to get excited about this boat? This lamination, I mean? Little boats it really tends to excel on because there's a weight penalty. And now it's not quite a portaging lamination anymore. If we build these things in tandems, they get heavier. They get into the 50-pound range. But on the solos, especially on the smaller solos like this 80K, now I've got a boat that, while it went from 19 pounds to 25 pounds, people look at 25 pounds and they say, well, that's not bad. And I got to save how much money for not buying that carbon boat? They get more tempted toward this sort of thing. In white golds, we do ruby and almond. So we've got a couple of color options. So for the photographers amongst us, the paddle solo boats, red is hands down a very, very popular color. And so essentially we've sacrificed a little bit of durability from Blacklight. And in return for that, you've saved a bunch of money, but at a higher weight penalty. And then normally the next one that I would talk about would be IXP. And you've seen me go past a couple IXPs in this video. But I'm going to do that in a separate video because it takes me a little while to talk about IXP. And so what I want to do is say the last little bit about general things that all of our boats share. And that is, first of all, that they're resin coated. At Bell, we transitioned from gel coat to resin coat in the early 2000s. And when we started building white golds at Northstar, we built the first few years of them with gel coats, and then we finally transitioned away from it. And why transition away from gel coat? Because it adds weight and decreases durability. Gel coat is heavy in the sense that it adds 4 to about 8 pounds per boat. Decreases durability. It decreases impact resistance notably. It tends to chip off and flake off, so it requires more consistent maintenance. And abrasion-wise, it's harder to maintain a gel coat than it is to maintain a resin coat. And then the other thing is, initially we did gel-coated white golds because with a gel coat you can cover up your mistakes. If there's a little imperfection in the cloth, if there's a loose string that we leave in there or anything else, guess what? Gel coat covers it all up because it's opaque. It's colored, it's paint. On resin-coated boats, you get to see all that stuff. You get to see every mistake that we make, and we don't make many because we've got some really stunning laminators. resin coats allow you to do a full recoat in a way that gel coats don't. And what's a recoat? It would be, and we're going to swing over to my boat, which we've seen in probably a few videos now. I've lost track. This might be the first one though. And that is a B17 and IXP. And if I was going to recoat this, I would tape right around the water line all the way around the boat. I would sand it anywhere that it's still shiny, and then I'd grab a paint roller with some resin, and I'd roll a new coat of resin on. I'd let it cure, and away I'd go. With gel coat, you got to futz to one little piece. You got to chip out all the little bad spots. You got to work it. You got to sand it to make it clean. Resin is forgiving. Resin is simple to maintain. That's why we went to resin coated. And then I'm going to jump over to float tanks for just a second and show you how small our float tanks are. And of course, that's a concern for people in the sense that they say, whoa, there's not much flotation there. But there is enough to allow the boat to float level if it's in the water. They're foam filled, which is the biggie on them. So after years at Bell of doing beautiful curved air tanks with plugs, we found that those air tanks, especially when they didn't have the plug in them, had a tendency to get leaks. Guess what? If you do something foam filled, it'll never fail. It's a 2-part marine grade foam, pore foam, that fills every void there. So we've got a case where the flotation can never fail. And it gives you more room for your feet and gear and all that other things too. And so next up, I'm going to try to jump into IXP.